Mirjam Zijderveld is my beloved colleague at the Hague University of Applied Sciences. And we are both lecturers at Industrial Engineering. She studied organizational psychology, and she's head of the Technology for Health program, which is the Engineers for Society version at Delft, I would say. And Mirjam, what do you want to say about me?
Let's think. You did a study of philosophy, and you're my colleague at Delft, but you're also working at the University of Amsterdam at the law faculty. Yeah. And in Delft, the Hague University has the technical faculty. And in the name there is also society. So we try to connect in the name. So it's the first step. But at first, then I give the microphone back. I want to ask, how are you holding on? I hope we can make you a little bit awake.
Yes.
But let's see.
Because we need you. That's the claim that we are making. The title for today is Fostering Ethical Competence in the Engineering Curricula. So we're switching now. We're waking you up, moving from the top-end designers who are doing responsible innovation of Jeroen's club, and the citizens who should be treated compassionate by the previous speakers, bunch of engineers. And now we move to the, let's say, a little bit lower end of applied engineers who do much of the work, the nitty-gritty work, let's say, where we discover where real innovation is possible. And that's the level of engineering we are teaching, and we want to show you that you can get engineering for society into these lower level applied engineering curricula if we do it together. That's the story. So we invite you to cooperate. Next one, yes.
No, it doesn't work. How do you do it?
Forward.
I'm not a technical.
No.
I'm the study
Right, push.
I work at the technical faculty.
Okay, so we changed the title because the title of my paper is From Moral Reasoning to Ethical Resilience, Engineering Ethics at our faculty the last 10 years. I've been the ethics lecturer for all the tech faculty in the last 20 years or so. I've been studying a lot of the attitudes of engineers. How do they really come to get responsible young professionals? They can come in, often they come in with high moral motivation, and they end up at their first job and saying, oh, shell, it's hell. Let's forget Kant, Mill, Aristotle. Let's forget innovation. This is impossible. This is dirty hands. I don't want to do that. So there's a negative effect that I noticed due to, maybe in part due to my own lectures in innovation, in motivation, and so on and so forth. We are destroying the initial motivations, and we shouldn't do that. So it's a really self-critical paper I wrote, and we don't want to move into that detail. I hope you click on, comment on it. I posted it on the website of the research group I'm in, which is totally filled by non-engineers. So they immediately ask, does one still have to teach that? Engineering for society, that's obvious. So just to let you know, be aware which audience you are dealing with. So please comment there, but we want to move on to inviting you to cooperate with our efforts to raise the level of ethical competence in our young professionals. So first comes a little bit of philosophy by me. How do we define ethical competence? It's so important to define it, just not because I'm a philosopher, but because we have to test it. We have to know whether we really teach it or not. Then Mirjam will talk a bit about the rich context in which our engineers, we are trying to get involved in the faculty to have our engineers really do some technology for health innovation. We then zoom in, Mirjam will zoom in on the specific student project at the Department of Industrial Engineering, which CROC, which stands for Care-Related Organizational Change. This is a project for which our students have to do. I will then talk a little bit about how ethics and international assignments are involved in getting them really to move on with their attitudes. And finally, we show that it also requires a kind of resilience to the bad world out there, so to say, to be really ethical competent as an engineer. And finally, we show some examples and offer you ideas on how you could cooperate. So, what is ethical competence? My claim is that it's more than moral competence, which I have been teaching for 20 years or so. Like the group of Jeroen van Hoven and the other two technical universities in the Netherlands, we are all involved in putting the lemma analysis at the core of teaching engineering ethics. You have to be able to recognize the dilemma, really be sensible to it, analyze it correctly, try to define the underlying values, try to accept the incommensurability between values. Well, these are all technical, ethical terms, and then come up with different options for action involving all the stakeholders and so on. So this is a list that was drawn up already in 2004 by the group of, among others, our colleague Ibo van der Poel, Lambert Royakkers in Eindhoven, which is a really good book. I really recommend it. It's in the English version. Do use it in your ethics courses. But it is all about cognitive skills, intellectual skills of dealing with this dilemma. Here I stand as Achilles in the Trojan War. What do I do? It's all hell, it's all terrible, and so on and so forth. So this heroic, existential heroism is not always working properly for our students. We have to come up with something more, I would say. Next sheet, please. So what more then is an ethical competence? To be ethical competent and to train it, you have to do dilemma analysis. This remains essential because it teaches our students that moral reasoning requires time. It does require cognitive skills. It's not just, well, I'm thinking of this and this is your intuition and let's do that. We have this terrible tradition of moral bar room or church talk in the Netherlands, whereas in other countries, luckily, moral analysis is more seen as an intellectual skill. So we have to work hard on that in the Netherlands, and dilemma analysis really does the work. Students really quickly pick up, this is really difficult stuff. It's more difficult than math. That's an important insight. So the second point is that it opens up the perspective of all stakeholders. Well, we all know of the tunnel vision of our students, and it's really important to get that in, and by presenting them with cases of dilemmas, it's really working. And finally, this tragic component is of course important. Here I'm standing, what do I have to do? Here I stand, I can do no other, is not by definition a bad attitude. However, these moral reflection skills are still not enough, and maybe even generate backlash. One simple example, I went to ABB, which is a big construction company who makes offshore industries for Shell and other oil companies. And I talked to 3 ex-students from Delft University and also from my own university, and they all came up with basically the same idea. It's just making dirty hands here. This ethics doesn't bring me anything. And so they're really disappointed and then go with the flow and do what the others do. And so they give in their original high moral motivation, which is really a problem. So I think the ability to reflect on differences between ethical frameworks and make a decision based on this theoretical and ideal level is not the way to go. We really have to work on that. So 3 additional skills, and now I'm moving up in tempo. Political situationism. You're not Achilles. You're not the one making decisions, and you're certainly not the strongest one in this political arena. Secondly, there is a cultural situationism. You have to be able to recognize the silent conventions in the company you're working in, but which you are already a part of. Maybe because of our education system also. So recognize those. And thirdly, a moral situationalism. And this is where I've been doing some research on myself. Much of our ethics is about showing respect for the dignity of the client, for the citizen, being compassionate to the citizens. But it has to involve showing an appropriate response to the not so kind citizen, to the not so compassionate company, and so on and so forth. So we have to get involved resilience. Much to say about that, but I won't. Because now we move to the rich context of research at THUAS.
Okay. You have to be close. Can you look out?
Yeah, stay close.
Yes.
We're so close.
Because there is a little thing here connecting us. And we have 4 research platforms at the Hague University, but we focus on one at our faculty. And that's the one on technology for health, and it's called Quality of Life. And that's the research platform. But in the beginning, when we started it, it was also focused on the educational program. It's now more going to research, but we also have to prepare our students to be a professional, and not all become researchers, especially at our University of Applied Sciences. So in our educational programs, we have to change the curricula to get them more prepared for society, and in this case, we do it in the context of health. We have a kind of method. Most of you, I think, know CDIO. It's a way to, how to say, to organize your curriculum with a didactical point of view. And something in it is the active learning focus. And in our curriculum, we have tried to get especially the focus on that active learning in our methods. And next one.
One example?
Yeah, next one. Yeah. We did a hackathon not so long ago, and it was not cracking only technical systems, but also a little bit social systems. And in that hackathon, we had a kind of multidisciplinary approach. It were all technical students, almost all. One medicine student and a few students from design studies. And next year we're going to organize it some broader, and we invite our more health-related studies to participate. And at that hackathon, it was 24-hour thinking about how to solve some problems in society. And the problems in society, they didn't think of themselves. They were some people from the neighborhood, from organizations in the neighborhood that encounter some of these problems. They were there, they were talking about their problems. They didn't give a real assignment, but they inspired the students to think about it and to come with some kind of solution for all the things they talked about.
And they did.
And they did. And it was
great.
Yeah, it was very great, because there was a kind of atmosphere that motivated all the people that were just looking at the corner of the door to come back again in those 24 hours. Yeah. We have in the curricula some new focus points. For example, at the mechatronics department, we are working now together with the kinetics department, and they're doing a lot of research on assistive devices, and they're involving all kinds of organizations in their projects.
In the health sector, yes.
Also in the health sector, but also from the technical point of view, like robotics.
Now we go to
and at our department, we have a project around change, and every year we do it one time a year for half a year, and then we have about 10 groups and 10 organizations that have some problem or challenge. And most of the time, the students find the organizations themselves. And they always have some struggle, somewhere in the politics of the organization, or with the system that's already there. And we have now combined some of the other courses to get them to overcome that problems.
Yeah, and be really ethical competent. So that was our aim with this project, and go quickly to them, but get them to feel proud on change that they help to improve, to implement is really important. So we're not just talking about design, but we're also talking about implementation and operation here. So, and then after 10 weeks, it's terrible. Insurance companies don't want to cooperate. Management is backward, and so forth. 5 minutes, thanks. So what we then do, we drop in an international assignments. They have to Skype with students abroad, that's where your students come in, and talk them about their assignment. How is this thing done in your country? Who is paying for this medical treatment, and so on and so forth? They learn a lot by talking to other students abroad. Engineering students don't happen to do that very often. They're not talkers, they are doers. So they learn really, really quickly, and they get a network. And that's really important, because for the assignment, they really have to find a specialist to know how it's done. And then come back to their company, their original assignment, and say, it could be done otherwise. So their whole way of thinking changes. Okay, and then comes in the ethics assignment. They have learned all these steps about the lemma analysis and a little bit of Kant and utilitarianism and so on and so forth. All great, but now they have to identify the dilemma this company is really dealing with. Often the company itself, the hospital, the care organization, has never defined it as a moral problem, has never defined it as a dilemma, what the core dilemma is they are now facing. And it's really interesting to see that it takes time and it takes effort to define these core values. And it helps to come back then from international information. Still it is possible that there is backlash. Still it's possible that students then say, well, they won't, or they can't, or society won't pay for it, and so on and so forth. So we have to accept that our whole conceive, design, implement, operate system, with all these great didactical systems, we can't talk about them now, but most of you know the whole syllabus, I hope, is still not able to deal with this sense of hopelessness. Push, please. So it's all top down and on top, and they just can't deal with it. So we need something more, and that is what I call the ethical resilience. The resilience to deal with a non-willing cooperation, a non-willing convention, even within yourself, and you open it up through international contacts and so on. So you really have to be able to accept change. Two quick examples, one from Mirjam.
Okay. We had a project on stalling scootmobiles. And that's just one. But in some buildings, they're piling. And there was a problem with the fire department and with paying for the spaces in the buildings. And they couldn't get a new solution. They couldn't find a new way of organizing it. And the students didn't know either. But in the international benchmark, they found solutions in England, where they had a complete different system and a complete different set of stakeholders that were participating in organizing those things. And also the costs of the parking were a little bit also at the, how do you say it, the people that use the scootmobiles had to pay a little for the parking, and in the Netherlands that wasn't done. But then they presented it to the stakeholders in the Netherlands, and they broadened their mind. They got all the stakeholders together that didn't participate at first, and then found it. We're talking now about the idea in England, and they are taking it into account.
So they really broke through a culture of accountability. Yeah. Nobody was accountable. There was a risk, those batteries could fire up and so on, but nobody was accountable. Yeah. And now, due to the English example, they really broke through this mindset. Similar idea, but other direction. A company who makes orthesis and prothesis wanted 3D printing, the newest technology to make these things. Our students talked to doctors in Tanzania. And what did they find out? They didn't use, as you imagine, 3D printing in Tanzania yet, but they had exactly the same working methods for making these prostheses as in the Netherlands. So they said, they went back to the company and said, 3D printing, you're not ready for it, because you have such old methods. You have not been thinking about how the present production technique could be made more efficient. So it's a hot technology, but you won't get it from us. So rethink how your corporation is working. So we found that really resilient because the standard way is to go for the hottest technology. We have to finalize. So our conclusion is that ethical competence is a difficult thing, but it can be fostered in our curricula if we do it together. So we need your students. Just click, please. Click on. So if we manage to have our students, not we, but our students discuss across borders their tech assignments, could be everything, but it could relate to real domains in technology for health, then you really get them competent. You make them resilient by discussing also the bad sides of society and of their own learning process. So if you want to join us this semester, please do so. Second semester you do the third one, and Mirjam will tell you how easy it is.
Yeah, because Paul made a Facebook page, a site, and you can just ask your students to join that Facebook page. And maybe you can do in your course something like we did, like give them points for doing that and for doing some Skype calls. And we just stimulated our students to do 2 Skype calls, but then they make it more themselves because they feel the need to talk further. And there is a kind of network that then emerges, yes. And you can do it a little bit smaller. You can say, give bonus points when you organize it, or you just stimulate your students. And we will have the Facebook page somewhere.
Yeah,
you can, okay.
So
Some impression of the hackathon, and that's our end. Yeah.